Hey guys, tonight we are setting out on a journey into the valleys of southern Mexico, where the air is heavy with history and the land is carved by rivers and ridges older than memory itself. You can almost hear the faint echo of drums on the wind, feel the warmth of the sun soaking the green hillsides, and see the stone silhouettes of ancient temples resting against the horizon. We'll be spending tonight drifting through the story of the Zapotec civilization whose people shaped sacred cities like Monte Albán and Mitla in ways that still inspire awe. So take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, I'd love to know where you are listening from and what time it is where you are, so leave that in the comments below. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The story begins in the valleys of Oaxaca, a place you picture as a broad patchwork of fields, rivers, and ridges, each one carrying the faint shimmer of ancient footsteps. You walk there in your imagination, drifting along the valley floor. The soil beneath you is rich and dark, fed by streams that wind down from the Sierra Madre. Corn stalks rise high, beans wrap themselves in spirals around their sturdy neighbors, and squash stretches its broad leaves outward. You hear the buzz of insects and the call of unseen birds. Farmers thousands of years ago would have heard these same sounds marking the rhythm of their day as they bent to plant and harvest. The Zapotec story is tied to this land, a cradle of fertility surrounded by mountains like great stone guardians. These ranges not only shaped the weather, capturing rains and shielding against cold winds, but also created a sense of separation, little valleys and terraces, each holding its own community. You sense how the land itself seems alive, breathing with spirits. To the Zapotec, the valleys were sacred not just because they gave food, but because every hill cave and spring was touched with divine presence. Historians tell us that around 1500 BCE, small villages began to cluster here. People cleared patches of land, building simple homes of thatch and mud brick. Fires flickered in hearths, where families gathered after days of tending fields. But even in these earliest times, there was more than survival, there were rituals. Evidence from early burials shows people placing pottery ornaments and sometimes even offerings of food beside their dead. The idea of a world beyond this one was already present. You imagine yourself walking through one of those first villages. Children laugh as they chase each other between houses. Women grind maize on stone metatis, the soft rasping sound blending with the low voices of men repairing tools or shaping clay. Smoke drifts upward, carrying with it the smell of roasting corn and herbs. It feels close, intimate, like life still does in small, rural communities. And yet woven into these daily acts are ceremonies. Someone marks the calendar for the next planting ritual, another leaves a bowl of maize at a cave entrance seeking the blessing of unseen forces beneath the earth. Archaeologists have discovered that the Zapotec heartland was never just one valley, but a network of three major ones: the Etla, the Tlacolula, and the Zimatlan. From above, they stretch like three outstretched arms, all meeting in a central point, the very place where the city of Monte Albán would one day rise. You picture this land as it looked millennia ago, dotted with hamlets, smoke rising here and there, trails winding across ridges, people moving goods and news from one valley to the next. The mystical tidbit that lingers is how the Zapotec believed their ancestors emerged from caves, jaguars, and even clouds. Imagine that people tracing their lineage not to mere human figures, but to elemental forces of the landscape and the sky. A noble might have claimed descent from a lightning bolt striking the earth, or from the swirling mist on a mountainside. To the Zapotec, ancestry was divine, a bridge between the human and the eternal. When you close your eyes, you can almost see a priest pointing to a cave mouth, whispering, here is where we came from." The valleys of Oaxaca nurtured these beliefs. Every river, bend, and cliff face became part of a sacred geography. The mountains themselves were gods, the caves their mouths, the springs their eyes. As you tread softly in your imagination, you realize the people here didn't separate the physical from the spiritual. They saw the world as layered with invisible currents running through soil, stone, and sky. Historians still argue whether the Zapotecs developed their rituals in isolation or whether they were influenced by neighbors to the north, such as the Olmec. The Olmec left colossal stone heads in early calendars, and it's tempting to think ideas flowed into Oaxaca with wandering merchants or pilgrims. Yet many believe the Zapotec crafted their identity uniquely, drawing from the land beneath their feet. This mystery, like a whisper lost in the valleys, remains unresolved. As twilight falls in your mind's eye, you stand on a ridge looking across the valley. Below you, fires twinkle from dozens of villages, each one like a star fallen to earth. Smoke rises, curling into the cooling air. In the far distance, you hear the faint beat of a drum, steady as a heartbeat marking some ritual you cannot quite see. The earth feels alive under your feet. This is the beginning, the valleys of Oaxaca, quiet yet full of promise, holding within them the seeds of a civilization that would build sky-high temples and glittering tombs. Your breath slows as you hold that view in your mind, the wide valley stretching outward, the mountains standing guard. Life stirs gently in the shadows, ancient and enduring, guiding you deeper into the dream of history. You let the vision of fires in the valley fade, only to find yourself drifting closer now, walking among the very first communities that take shape in this sacred land. The year in your mind is far before great stone cities rise somewhere between 1500 and 500 BCE, when the Zapotec people still lived in villages of modest homes, each built with wood thatch and mud. Yet, as you pass through them, you feel the pulse of something greater, forming a rhythm of life that will echo across centuries. In one small hamlet, you picture the earth packed firm beneath your feet, the pathways between homes lined with small gardens of maize beans and squash. This three sisters planting technique becomes a genius symphony of sustenance. Maize provides the tall stalks, beans climb upward, adding protein and restoring nitrogen to the soil, while broad squash leaves spread out, keeping the earth moist and shaded. You walk past families tending these crops, and you realize that agriculture here is not only survival, it is ceremony. Every planting, every harvest is tied to cycles of ritual offerings. You see gourds of maize placed near springs, little clay figurines left in caves, gestures of gratitude to unseen forces, believed to dwell just beyond human sight. In the center of one village, a gathering takes place. People kneel around a hearth, where the flames crackle shadows dancing across their painted faces. A shaman sprinkles ground seeds into the fire, and the smoke rises like a prayer. You can almost smell the sharp, sweet scent of burning herbs, the way it clings to your skin and hair. The community hums with quiet reverence, voices chanting in low unison. What might sound like simple melody to you carries meaning older than words, a binding of people. Crops, earth, and sky into a single rhythm. Archaeologists digging into these ancient sites have found remains of early temples, not yet the grand stone platforms of later centuries, but small mounds built of earth and stone. Even then, the Zapotec were raising the land itself, shaping it into sacred spaces. Imagine walking to such a mound at night, lit only by torches. You stand with others as a priest gestures to the sky, aligning the mound with the stars. To the Zapotec, every structure was part of a cosmic design. You notice the beginnings of hierarchy too. Some houses are larger, better stocked, their storage bins filled with more maize. These early signs hint at leaders, people who guided ritual and resource alike. Over time, these leaders would claim descent from supernatural ancestors, saying their bloodline was divine. In this moment, though, it's more subtle: an older woman guiding, chance a man standing taller when decisions are made, a family buried with more offerings than their neighbors. The mystical detail that lingers is the Zapotec belief that the dead didn't vanish, but continued to walk alongside the living. Graves beneath the floors of homes suggest that families lived literally on top of their ancestors, sharing the same earth. You step carefully through a house where beneath the packed dirt floor lies a grandmother buried with a jar of maize gruel to sustain her. Children run overhead, their laughter rising as if the dead could hear. To the Zapotec, they probably could. Ancestors were guardians whispering guidance through dreams and the rustle of wind. You sense the closeness of worlds here, no wall separating one from the other. Historians still argue whether these villages formed independently in the Oaxaca valleys, or whether migration from outside brought new ideas. Some suggest the highlands saw people arriving from the Gulf Coast, carrying Olmec influences. Others insist the valleys, rich and fertile, naturally gave rise to their own culture without outside spark. The truth remains blurred like a mist, rolling through mountains, refusing to part. As you walk, you notice the tools in their hands, obsidian blades glinting black under the sun, stone axes for clearing, brush clay vessels painted with simple lines and spirals. You can almost feel the texture of one vessel in your hands, smooth yet uneven, each curve molded by a potter's fingers thousands of years ago. These objects are not merely functional. They're decorated with care, as if beauty itself were necessary to daily life. Evenings are gentle in these first villages. Picture yourself sitting beside a fire, listening to cicadas hum as sparks leap into the darkness. Families gather telling stories that blend myth and memory. Perhaps one tale speaks of a jaguar who taught humans how to plant maize, or of clouds forming into ancestors watching from above. Each story shapes identity, pulling people closer into the fabric of community. The valley nights are cool, and you feel a breeze carrying scents of earth and wood smoke. In the distance, dogs bark, softly guarding the edges of the settlement. Children doze beside their mothers, lulled by the sound of crackling firewood. The stars above seem brighter here, scattered across the sky in dense rivers of light. For the Zapotec, those constellations were guides, maps for ritual timing and destiny. You look up, sensing how their world was never limited to what they touched, but always reaching outward into sky and spirit. As dawn breaks, you see mist rising from the fields, curling in delicate ribbons that catch the early sun. Farmers step into rows of maize, their shadows long and thin. A woman carries a gourd of water balanced on her head, beads of condensation running down its sides. The village comes alive again, grounded in the eternal cycle of planting, growing, harvesting, and honoring. And through it all, the faint murmur of something larger stirs. These are no longer scattered families, but a people laying roots. Each seed planted, each mound raised, each ancestor buried, is a step toward something monumental. You feel it as a low hum in the earth beneath your feet, the first stirrings of a civilization destined to rise into the mountaintops. You let the village fires fade into the distance, and now you find yourself rising higher, higher still, as if the valley itself is lifting you toward the mountaintops. Your breath catches when you realize you are standing on the ridge where Monte Albán, would one day appear a sacred city set upon a flat-topped mountain that overlooks all three arms of the Oaxaca valleys. The year in your mind is sometime around 500 BCE, when the people here began to do something astonishing, something few civilizations anywhere had ever attempted. Instead of building on fertile valley soil, they carved a city into the summit of a mountain. You feel the crunch of gravel under your feet as you walk upward, imagining what it must have been like for the first settlers who decided to climb here and stay. Below the valleys stretch endlessly dotted with villages, rivers glinting like threads of silver. Up here the air feels thinner, cooler, and charged with something unspoken. Why would they build so high, leaving the easy abundance of the valleys? Historians still argue whether it was for defense, for ritual closeness to the heavens, or for the sheer display of power. Perhaps it was all three. Step by step you sense the enormous labour required. Whole hillsides levelled with stone retaining walls, terraces cut into rock, massive plazas shaped where once there were only jagged ridges. Imagine the sound hammers striking, voices calling baskets of earth hauled up slopes. Thousands must have worked in rhythm, transforming the raw mountain into a sacred heart. The effort itself was ritual, the reshaping of land into order, a human echo of the gods' creation of the world. You walk across the grand plaza of Monte Albán, an immense open space surrounded by pyramids, temples, and platforms. Today it is silent, grass-covered, and serene. But in your imagination, the plaza thrums with life. Drums beat steadily, carrying across the mountaintop. Priests ascend stone stairways, their white cotton garments flowing, feathered headdresses catching the sun. At the plaza's edges, people gather, watching ceremonies unfold, offerings placed before altars, incense coiling upward into the sky. You can almost smell it. Copal resin, burning sharp and sweet, a scent that still lingers in Oaxaca today. The mystical detail of Monte Albán lies in its alignment. Archaeologists have discovered that the city is positioned with uncanny precision, its buildings oriented towards celestial events. Stand in the plaza, and you notice how stairways face solstice sunsets, how temples align with stars and planets. The city itself becomes a giant observatory, a calendar in stone. To the Zapotec, this was not coincidence. They believed in a cosmos woven together, earth, sky, and underworld, and their city was its mirror. On one platform you see something startling carved into stone, the famous danzantes. These are human figures etched in flowing lines, twisted as if in strange postures. At first glance they seem to be dancers, their limbs bent in rhythm. But scholars suggest otherwise, that these are prisoners of war, shown, contorted, sometimes even dismembered. If true, it means Monte Albán displayed its dominance in stone, a constant reminder of power. Yet historians still argue whether the figures were dancers, victims, or perhaps even shamans in trance. The ambiguity itself adds a haunting beauty. You stare at them, trying to decide, and feel the mountain keep its secret. Life on Monte Albán was not only ritual and politics. Picture yourself wandering its residential terraces, where thousands of common people lived in adobe houses, children playing in courtyards, dogs barking at strangers. Families cooked maize tortillas on stone griddles, steam rising into cool mountain air. Artisans chipped obsidian into blades, potters shaped vessels painted with gods, and glyphs, weavers worked cotton and maguey fibers into cloth. The hum of daily life wrapped around the sacred core, ordinary yet essential. And yet even in daily rhythms, the mountain setting gave life a different flavour. Imagine waking each morning, stepping outside and seeing valleys stretch beneath you like a painted map. The perspective itself must have reinforced a sense of order that from here the rulers looked down upon their world, guiding it with divine authority. For those rulers claiming descent from gods of clouds and lightning, this mountaintop was proof of their connection to the heavens. At night, Monte Albán must have been breathtaking. Torches flickered across plazas, their flames painting temples with shifting shadows. Priests studied the stars from observatories, tracking Venus, the moon, and constellations that marked cycles of time and ritual. You tilt your head back and imagine those same stars shining as they did then, ancient yet unchanged, whispering their secrets to those who dared listen. Archaeologists believe Monte Albán was among the first true cities of Mesoamerica, rivaling contemporaries like Teotihuacan. At its height, it may have held 20,000 people, a staggering number perched atop stone and ridge. Think of the sheer will it took to sustain a city on such a mountaintop. Water had to be carried soil, had to be hauled up trade, had to flow constantly from valleys below. It was an act of defiance, as if the Zapotecs declared to earth and sky alike, "We belong here between worlds." And you sense it walking those plazas in your imagination. You feel caught between the human and the divine. Every step echoes against stone carved by thousands of hands. Every breeze carries whispers of ceremonies long past. Monte Albán is not just a city, it is a vision of power, faith, and endurance, etched into the very bones of a mountain. As your breath slows, you linger at the edge of the plaza. Below, the valley darkens fires twinkling in scattered villages. Above, stars ignite eternal. Between them stands the mountain city, vast and silent now, yet alive in memory. You close your eyes, sensing its weight, its mystery, and the hum of history beneath your feet. You move from the open plaza toward the shadowed edge where stairways rise wide, and patient, inviting your feet to climb. Stone warms under your palms as you steady yourself, and the steps ask you to slow down, to breathe, to notice the hush that settles at the threshold of a temple. You feel a little thrill the way you do when you enter an old cathedral or a museum after hours, because you know that thresholds change how you listen. The air tastes faintly of dust and resin. Somewhere unseen, a breeze slips across carved corners and makes a soft whispering note, as if the building hums to itself. Here, the temples stand upon platforms that ring the grand plaza, their staircases drawing the body upward and the mind inward. You trace a finger along the edge of a block and feel how precise it is, the masonry fitted so closely that time has barely pried it apart. Priests once climbed these steps with bundles of copal and bowls of offerings, their cotton garments brushing stone, their sandals tapping a steady rhythm. The platforms aren't big for comfort. They're big for meaning. Every height is a statement. Up here the world thins. You're nearer to sun and star, nearer to the sky beings who govern rains, growth and fate. You angle toward a structure with a shape that refuses to be ordinary. The skewed arrow-like building some call an observatory. Its corners aren't lined up with the plaza, and that eccentricity makes you pause. On its face, glyphs and place names dance markers of distant towns. You breathe in and imagine people gathering to hear proclamations. Victory's the timing of rituals. Historians still argue whether this unusual edifice primarily tracked the sky or commemorated conquest, whether it was a scientific instrument or a stone banner of power. Perhaps it was both, as so many sacred things are useful and holy at the same time. Inside the temple precincts, you picture rooms that once glowed with torchlight and the glimmer of polished stone. Effigy urns squat like attentive guardians, wide-eyed and majestic, many wearing the visage of the rain and lightning lord you've heard murmured through these valleys. Cotijo, the old storm-bearer whose curling fangs and stepped motifs flash in ritual reds and whites. Smoke coils up from the bowls placed before them, the resin's scent, sweet and metallic like warm honey mixed with a hint of iron. The priests chant in a cadence that settles the mind. The sound lands not on your eardrums, but deeper somewhere in your chest, where breath becomes prayer. A curious tidbit catches your attention, mirrors. In a corner, a polished disc of obsidian or iron ore gleams with a dark, liquid shine. Imagine a diviner bending over that surface, reading in it. The shifting faces of clouds, the flare of a distant planet at dawn, the faint tremor of a decision yet to be made. You lean closer in your mind and see your own reflection. They're thinner, dimmer, as if the mirror prefers the future to the present. The belief that a surface can look both ways to you and beyond you feels perfectly at home in these rooms. The temple walls hold stories in their reliefs and paint. You can still see fragments of colour clinging to stucco, a ghost of cinnabar red and lime white, a breath of black line, where a serpent once curled. These paintings and carvings record alliances, rites, and the traffic between human and divine. And though your modern side might want a neat caption for every image, you're gently reminded that meaning unfolds like incense, slow curling, dissipating, yet somehow filling everything. Scholars still debate whether certain effigy urns represent gods themselves or priests becoming gods through costume and breath. The line, like so much else here, blurs on purpose. You step back into sunlight and feel the heat again, the plaza open and buzzing in your inner ear. But your path slants now toward the cool dark, because everything in this city has an echo below. Where there are temples, there are tombs. You cross to a low doorway built into a platform side and descend. The light thins. The air cools and smells of stone mineral and clean. Your skin prickles as you run your hand along the passage, chalky and slightly damp. Somewhere a droplet falls with a hollow tick, and you become aware of how your own breath sounds in enclosed space, steady, patient, reverent, without trying to be. When the chamber opens, you feel it more than see it first. The hush of it, the way space becomes gentle. Along the walls, benches and niches hold vessels and urns. On the floor once, there were bodies laid with care wrapped and honoured. In your mind, a torch flares, and the room warms with a gold-red glow. You remember a fact whose gravity is impossible to ignore in 1932. Archaeologist Alfonso Caso entered a chamber here, a place we call Tomb 7, at Monte Albán, and faced a treasure trove of objects, gold pectorals, turquoise, mosaics, shell ornaments, carved bone, spondylis, and more so rich it reshaped what the world thought it knew of the region's artistry. You turn a mental spotlight over a bat-shaped gold pectoral wings, wide mouth open in a forever silent chant, and you can't help but think how treasure is only a small word for the gravity of remembrance. That chamber's story shivers with questions. Historians still argue whether Tomb 7 held Zapotec rulers, or if it was repurposed in later centuries by Mixtec nobles, placing their own dead into a Zapotec-made womb of stone. The artifact's styles sing in several tongues, and the bones tell partial tales. You stand in this quiet, listening to debate echo as softly as dust. Either way, the chamber speaks of continuity, old spaces receiving new grief, old sanctities welcoming new names. You drift to another burial space in your mind, one whose doorway still carries a painted face. Tomb 104, famous for its stucco friezes and traces of vivid colour. On its walls, the storm deity grins through curling fangs and stepped motifs. Serpents unwind, ancestors gesture as if mid-sentence. The paint is faint now, like a melody, recalled rather than performed, but you can tell that colour once drenched these rooms, that the dead lay in a sunset of pigments chosen for their meanings. The mainstream fact sits comfortably here. Monte Albán's tombs often housed effigy urns and painted friezes, a mixture of ceramics and architecture that turns funerary rooms into microcosms, small curated worlds for the journey onward. You try to imagine the ritual. A family files down the corridor, soft-souled, carrying bowls of maize and cacao, a woven cloth, a favourite tool, a carved bone flute. A priest touches each item to an urn before placing it beside the body. A conch shell sounds a low, all-body note that feels like the ocean speaking from hundreds of miles away. The sound hangs, then fades into the stones. A door slab slides shut heavy as the end of a sentence, and the living climb back towards sunlight, leaving the chamber to its long, measured silence. There's a mystical whisper carried by these rooms that objects remember, that gold is sunlight made solid, that jade is a drop of mountain heart, that shell is an echo of the sea listening to you. Placed together, they form a map the spirit can read with fingertips instead of eyes. You stand very still and let that idea hover, whether or not you believe it. Literally, you feel what it means, care turned into matter, love turned into arrangement, memory turned into pattern. Back in the open, you glance once more at the terrace houses and the temples above them, and feel how the city braids two desires to rise and to root. Temples reach for the sky with stairways that teach the body how to ascend. Tombs reach into the earth with corridors that teach the heart how to let go. Both are classrooms. Both are instruments. Both are places where time slows enough for the world to speak at its natural volume. You run your hand across one last block of stone and feel the subtle vibrations of footfall from long ago, the way even silence can carry rhythm. You look to the horizon line, the mountains ringing the valleys in a calm blue embrace, and you sense how every ascent here anticipates a descent, how every offering has a reflection, how the city breathes in and out through temple and tomb. Above the sky leans close. Sky. Below the earth listens, and you walk softly between them, not afraid of the dark, not blinded by the light, simply gently aware that both belong to you tonight. You rise slowly from the cool hush of tombs and step back into the light, where daily rhythms return. It is easy to be dazzled by the pyramids and temples, but as you linger in Monte Albán, you feel a tug to wander away from the plazas down narrow terraces where families actually lived, cooked, played, and dreamed. Civilization is not only carved in stone monuments, it is whispered in kitchens sung in lullabies, and pressed into tortillas by hand. You tread along a terrace where rows of adobe houses line the slope. Each is simple walls of packed earth roofs, framed with wood thatch or tile. Children scamper in the dust, their laughter rising above the hum of chores. A woman grinds maize on a metate, the stone slab worn smooth by generations of hands. Her rhythm is steady, press, push, release, and the sound carries like a soft drumbeat. She pats the dough into thin rounds and cooks them on a clay griddle, the air filling with the scent of warm maize. You can almost taste it, slightly nutty smoky from the fire. Men walk past with hoes slung over their shoulders, heading toward fields carved into terraces below the mountain. Agriculture sustains everything, so even here on the mountaintop, people climb down to tend maize beans, squash, and chili peppers. They check irrigation ditches, pull weeds, and chase away birds. Under the sun, sweat beads on their foreheads, soaking tunics of woven cotton or maguey fiber. You walk with them for a moment, sensing how farming is both labor and ritual. Each planting season begins with offerings cornmeal scattered at the field's edge, a clay figurine buried in soil. The Zapotec believed crops thrived best when the spirits were fed first. Markets are alive with chatter. Picture yourself standing in a plaza on market day stalls, shaded by woven mats, piles of red chile and green herbs spilling over baskets, gourds of cacao, ready to drink, and shining obsidian blades glinting beside clay whistles shaped like birds. You catch the mingled aromas, smoke from roasting maize, the tang of fermenting maguey, the sweetness of honey. Traders from other valleys arrive with woven cloth, carved shells, or salt from distant coasts. The buzz of voices is soothing, a blend of barter and gossip. Someone calls out prices, another laughs at a joke, and children tug at skirts pointing to toys carved from wood. The social web of the Zapotec is clear even in daily life. Extended families share courtyards, helping raise children together, tending fires, and honouring ancestors. You see clay figurines placed discreetly near hearths, small guardians of the household. Stories are told in the evenings, tales of jaguar spirits cloud ancestors and trickster animals. Around the fire, voices soften, and you hear the flute's gentle song, breath turning into melody. A child rests against your arm eyelids, heavy, lulled by warmth and rhythm. The mystical touch is in how every corner of daily existence carries sacred meaning. Even salt carried from far-off marshes is sprinkled with reverence before it is used. Fire lit each morning is more than warmth. It is the living breath of the household. A mother whispers a prayer as she stirs her pot, believing the spirit of maize listens. You look closer and realize there's no line between the sacred and the ordinary. Every act is a conversation with unseen forces. Historians still argue whether Monte Albán's common folk experience life as subjects serving elite rulers, or whether community identity created a shared sense of pride. Some evidence shows rigid hierarchy, grand tombs for nobles, humble burials for others. Yet there are also signs of collective rituals, festivals that involved everyone, moments when the entire city became one voice. The truth, like the smoke of incense, refuses to stay still. In a small workshop, artisans shape the world. A potter spins clay, coaxing bowls into life, painting them with geometric patterns or the faces of gods. Nearby, a craftsman carves bone into needles, combs, or decorative plaques, each line etched with care. Jewelers set turquoise into mosaic, shimmering like bits of sky captured in stone. You watch the patience in their hands, knowing these same objects might one day rest in tombs or be exchanged in far-off markets. Beauty is not luxury here. It is necessity. It binds the living to the eternal. Even games carry meaning. In the ball court carved into Monte Albán's slopes, players move swiftly, hips striking a heavy rubber ball, sending it bouncing along sloped walls. The crowd cheers softly, a wave of sound rolling through the court. To you, it might look like sport, but to them, it is ceremony. Cosmos played in miniature. The ball is the sun, its movement a cycle, and the outcome tied to ritual significance. You stand on the sidelines, your heart quickening with each strike, each rebound echoing like thunder. As night falls again, the mountain city exhales. Fires glow in terraces, smoke rising into the stars. Families gather around their hearths, sharing tamales, laughing softly, weaving tales before bed. Dogs curl up at doorways, ears twitching at distant sounds. Somewhere a priest chants in a temple, incense rising. Somewhere else a child dreams of cloud ancestors descending to speak. You close your eyes, letting the rhythm of daily Zapotec life settle over you, simple, sacred, enduring. Sacred. The mountain city quiets around you, fires, dimming children asleep. Yet you feel a pulse that does not fade. It is the pulse of time itself, measured not in seconds or minutes, but in cycles round and eternal. The Zapotec did not simply live day to day. They lived by calendars, sacred rhythms that mark the turning of sun, moon, and stars. You sense that if you listen closely, the beat of time is as real as the thrum of a drum carried by the wind. You step back into the plaza of Monte Albán this time, not as a bustling market or temple square, but as a giant timepiece. The buildings around you stand like markers on a clock face, their alignments whispering secrets. One temple captures the solstice sunrise, another faces the equinox sunset. A shadow glides across a stairway at just the right hour, telling when to plant maize, when to call the rain gods, when to open tombs for offerings. The city itself is a calendar, an enormous instrument tuned to the heavens. Mainstream history tells us the Zapotec developed two interconnected calendars, a 260-day sacred calendar and a 365-day solar calendar. You picture a priest standing before you, a bundle of painted sticks in his hands, each one marking days. He lays them out in patterns on the ground, murmuring numbers, counting forward until cycles align. The sacred 260-day count governs ritual prophecy and the naming of children. The solar 365-day cycle governs planting, harvest, and civic order. Every 52 years, the two calendars meet their cycles, weaving together like threads in a loom. That moment was sacred renewal when fires were extinguished, and then lit anew when the world felt fragile but reborn. You sense how this calendar world shaped daily life. Imagine a child's naming ceremony. Her birth date is cast in the 260-day calendar, her destiny traced by numbers and symbols. Parents listen as a priest explains whether her path will be blessed by rain gods or shadowed by challenges. The name given is not mere sound but prophecy. Later, as she grows, each festival, each planting, each marriage is guided by those same cycles. Life is woven tightly into cosmic rhythm. The mystical tidbit whispers in your ear to the Zapotec numbers themselves were alive, each carrying divine essence. The number 4 could mean the corners of the world, while the number 13 pulsed with sacred intensity tied to levels of the heavens. Numbers were not abstractions, they were beings with character and power. You imagine counting on your fingers each digit, not just a tool, but a companion spirit watching as you mark days. In Monte Albán, priests kept track of time with both observation and ritual. You walk with one to the skewed observatory building, feeling the rough edges of carved stone beneath your fingertips. He explains through gesture, pointing at Venus in the dawn sky, showing how its cycle of appearances matches ritual days. You see his eyes glimmer as the planet brightens, a tiny fire piercing the pale horizon. To him, Venus is not just a planet, but a god, a messenger moving between worlds. Its rising and setting mark when wars begin, when rituals must unfold, when offerings are due. Historians still argue whether Zapotec priests shared knowledge directly with neighboring civilizations, or if parallel discoveries blossomed independently. Some note how similar the 260-day calendar is to that of the Maya, suggesting trade and shared wisdom. Others argue the Zapotec nestled in their valleys, developed their calendar uniquely. The debate lingers like a pendulum, never quite settling, as if time itself prefers ambiguity. Ritual festivals punctuated the calendar like stars across the night. You imagine one now, a ceremony to call the rains. In the plaza, people gather faces painted with spirals, feathered headdresses swaying. Priests chant the count, aligning the ritual to the sacred day. Copal smoke thickens. Drums beat steady. Then water is poured from gourds onto the stone floor, splashing in rhythmic arcs, symbolizing rain yet to come. Children scatter flower petals bright against the grey stone. Everyone gazes skyward, waiting, trusting that their alignment with the calendar will persuade the clouds. Even ordinary chores are mapped to cycles. Farmers plant not simply when soil is ready, but when the count decrees. A man sharpening a blade may whisper, "Today is a good day for work because the calendar marks it auspicious." A woman weaving may wait until a number tied to fertility to begin her cloth. Life itself feels synchronized to the breath of gods. At night, you lie on the plaza stones, the chill seeping into your back, and look at the skies the Zapotec would have done. Stars wheel slowly, each movement a note in a song older than memory. You picture priests calculating the year, not with clocks, but with shadows, alignments, and intuition. They trust in patterns that never break, even if clouds hide the stars for days. Time is not fragile here. It is strong, endless, a river that circles back upon itself. You close your eyes and hear the cadence of a priest's chant, numbers rising and falling like waves. 1, 2, 3, 13. Then it starts again, cycling without end. The repetition is hypnotic, almost lulling like a heartbeat or the hum of a fan. You feel yourself surrendering to it, realizing the Zapotec lived not in linear progress, but in circles, each moment folding back into eternity. The city breathes with you, stones and sky united. You exhale, and somewhere in that long breath, a day ends. A cycle turns, and a new one begins. The rhythm is eternal, and you float within it, calm, weightless, unhurried, like a leaf carried gently by a stream that has no end. Your ear is still tuned to the cadence of numbers when you notice that the plaza stones around you carry another kind of counting shapes, faces, place signs and curling scrolls of speech that look as if breath has been painted into stone. You kneel and trace a groove with one fingertip. The line is shallow, cool, and precise, and in that simple sensation, you feel the hush of another discipline writing. The Zapotec do not only speak to gods with drums and calendars, they press memory into signs so the future can listen. You move along a row of carved slabs as if turning the pages of a heavy book. Here a date sits like a jewel made of dots and bars, neat and balanced. There a face appears in profile, an ear spool bright with stylized light, a headdress flaring like a small fire. You look closer and see the familiar arithmetic of Mesoamerica bars for fives, dots, for ones, circles, for the zero that is both nothing and the fertile cradle of everything. The counting you felt in the calendar is now pressed into glyphs, visible, portable, repeatable. A clear, steady fact anchors you among the oldest known examples of writing in all Mesoamerica comes from this region. At San Jose Mogote, not far from here, an early monument shows a captive and a name rendered as a day sign, 1. Earthquake scholars often call it dating to the centuries before Monte Albán truly rose. That image flickers in your mind like a faint ember, a name, a number, a deed preserved in stone. Later on the mountaintop, the habit becomes a language of power and prayer. You step toward the skewed building you visited before the odd arrow-like structure that refuses the plaza's compass and imagine its walls studded with carved slabs. They bear place glyphs and upside-down heads, stark and declarative. The message needs no translation in your bones. These towns are named, these rivals are toppled, these events are counted. Building J becomes a register of reach, a stony ledger of conquest, inscribed with the same calm neatness you find on a ledger's page. You don't hear triumph in the carving so much as certainty, the still voice of a record that means to endure. And yet it is not all war and rule. In patios and on stair risers, on door lintels, and tomb walls, phrases of devotion, dates for rituals, and names of honored people appear small and exact. A glyph might be a god's mask, a mountain that doubles as a town sign, a flowing ribbon. That is not ribbon at all, but speech. Made visible, the classic curled scroll that once you see it cannot be unseen. You realize the Zapotec scribe knows how to draw breath. You imagine one of those scribes at work. He sits cross-legged on a mat, a shell palette holding ink made from carbon black and iron-rich earths red from cochineal, crushed like tiny rubies, white from powdered lime. His brush tip is fine, rumoured in later tradition to be made from the soft hair of a rabbit for the thinnest lines. Before he paints, he touches a pinch of copal to the brazier, and the resin's sweetness rises. He fasts in the morning and washes his hands in cool water so his skin is steady. He does not think of letters as you might. He thinks of beings. Each sign carries a face, an appetite, a path. When he lays a glyph, he is not only recording, he is inviting a presence to sit down and stay. That is your mystical tidbit tonight. For the Zapotec, writing can be a summoning away to coax the spirit of a name, a place, or a day to inhabit the world a little longer. The system itself to your eye feels like a mosaic, part picture, part sound. Scholars describe it as logosyllabic. Some signs stand for whole ideas or words, while others echo syllables, letting scribes spell names and places with a clever mix of meaning and sound. You run your gaze across place glyphs that look like hills, with stair steps, water curls, or plants sprouting, and then catch smaller signs tucked beside them, nimbly shaping a pronunciation. It's architecture for the tongue. But here a soft, honest uncertainty drifts in like morning fog. Historians still argue whether the Zapotec script captured the spoken language fully or favoured names, titles, and dates, whether phonetic elements were common or sparing, and how much the system changed across centuries and towns. Some point to links with later Mixtec manuscripts, some to echoes that travel toward Maya writing, and still others to the possibility of separate bursts of invention in different regions. The conversation is ongoing, the best kind of argument, patient and precise, kept alive by new finds and careful listening. You tilt toward a lintel where paint once held the room together like a song. Most Zapotec manuscripts, those spread-folded books painted on deerskin, did not survive the humidity of time or the flames of conquest, and so you are left with the sturdier pages of stone and stucco. You feel a quiet grief at the loss. Whole libraries, unleafed by rain and history, and yet what endures is eloquent. A single, well-carved date can hold a city steady. A name joined to a place can pull a lineage taut across generations. A god's curling eye can say presence in a way even silence respects. Your hand settles on a stone where a speech scroll leaves a noble's mouth. You hear it impossibly as a low thread of sound, the kind you half catch at the edge of sleep. You think of how, even now, a caption under a picture can pin meaning to it, keep it from sliding away. The Zapotec knew that also, and they understood something you feel in your body. Words are breath. Make breath into a shape and you make time sit down for a while. Another steady fact lives here, those bar and dot numerals you saw on calendars, lively lives on monuments, recording day names in the 260-day count, and tying events to the 365-day year. When you see 13 reed or 8 jaguar chiseled into a panel, you glimpse a date that belonged to a ceremony, a birth or a battle. You also glimpse the conviction that history matters only when it is placed and placed correctly in time. Your mind wanders gently to the Casca Jewel block far away in the Gulf lowlands, often cited as an even earlier, perhaps Olmec flirtation with writing. You let it drift there and back, acknowledging layers of invention blooming like wildflowers after rain. Whether the Zapotec wrote first or near first no longer tugs at you. What matters is that they wrote, and in doing so gave later readers like you tonight a handhold in the cliff face of the past. Even now in villages that still speak Zapotec languages, you hear a continuity tones, stepping carefully, words carrying histories like folded cloth. Imagine a modern artisan painting a festival banner the name of a saint, flanked by a date, the town crest bright with stepped mountains. The old grammar of meaning and place survives, repurposed, smiling at you from a new surface. As dusk leans in across the plaza, you notice how the carvings look different in dying light shadows pool in the cuts, and the figures seem to lift. A wind moves thin and even, and for a second you feel as if the speech scrolls are indeed moving, a tide rising in slow motion. You whisper a date to yourself, any date one you love, and feel it hover like a small lamp in your chest. Writing does that. It turns a moment into a room you can visit again. You rise slow and rested and leave the slabs to their coolness. Behind you, dots and bars continue to count faces, continue to look left into a permanent afternoon, and the scrolls keep unfurling, always mid-sentence, as if the mountain itself is still speaking softly to the sky. The glyphs and calendars still shimmer in your mind when you lift your gaze upward, because here in the high valleys, the sky is never just background, it is alive, a theatre for beings vast and strange. You lie back on the stone of the plaza, cool beneath your shoulders, and stare at the stars. Slowly, as your breathing evens, those stars seem to shift, to gather into patterns until you sense how the Zapotec once looked upward and saw a cosmos filled not with silence, but with God's spirits and animal messengers. You remember the storm lord Cotillo, whose urns and carvings stared from temple walls. His face is unmistakable curling, fangs bulging eyes, the lightning bolt running from mouth to earth. To the Zapotec, Cotillo was not only the bringer of rains, but the thunder itself, the lightning's fierce strike, and the fertility that followed. His breath was storm wind, his gift the green shoots pushing through soil, offerings of maize. Copal, and sometimes even sacrificed birds or animals, were given so that Cotillo would be generous, not wrathful. You close your eyes, and in the hum of your own breath you hear thunder rolling far away, as if the god still murmurs across the valleys. Yet Cotillo was only one among many. The Zapotec pantheon was layered, filled with beings who could shift shape blend animal with human straddle life and death. Imagine a priest donning a jaguar pelt painted with spots of black, stepping into a trance, as drums thud steadily. To the people watching, he's no longer a man pretending. He is Jaguar, the fierce guardian of mountains and caves. Jaguars carried meanings of both danger and divine power, moving between the worlds with grace. You see his tail twitch in the firelight, and a shiver moves down your arms. The mystical tidbit here is the Nahual, the belief that every person is tied to an animal spirit twin. This spirit could protect you, guide you, or even harm if neglected. You imagine someone whispering to a child at birth, "Your Nahual is the owl," or "yours is the coyote." That bond shaped destiny. On certain nights, people believed Nahuals could walk the earth, blending with their human counterparts. Picture yourself walking through the village at midnight, seeing a shadow slip past a fox's eyes gleam. And for a heartbeat, you wonder if it is only an animal or someone's hidden soul. To the Zapotec, the cosmos was layered like a pyramid, heavens above earth in the middle underworld below. Caves were mouths to that underworld, rivers, its veins, mountains, its pillars. The sun travelled through all three in its daily journey, born at dawn, strong at midday, dying into the underworld at dusk, only to be reborn. You trace that arc across the sky with your finger, and it feels both simple and profound, the promise that endings are never final, that each descent is preparation for another rise. Historians still argue whether Zapotec cosmology developed in close connection with the Olmec or Maya, or whether its symbols emerged independently from the rhythms of the Oaxacan valleys. They debate whether Cochillo echoes the broader Mesoamerican rain god, or is a uniquely Zapotec vision. The lines between influence and originality blur as cultures traded goods, marriages, and ideas. What remains certain is the way the Zapotec wrapped cosmos around them like a woven cloak, each thread alive with meaning. Festivals brought those threads together. Imagine one the plaza fills at dusk, people carrying torches, their faces painted in red spirals. Priests climb a platform and chants begin deep and steady. Dancers wearing masks of owls, bats, and serpents move in circles, their shadows leaping across stone. Incense thickens, curling upward like clouds carrying prayers. Overhead the stars align with the temple's edge marking the sacred day. A shout rises a call to Cochillo, and in that moment, lightning flashes over the valley. Gasps ripple through the crowd because the god has answered. You can almost feel the hairs on your arms rise, as if electricity buzzes through you. Animal messengers weave constantly through this cosmos. The owl is tied to night, and prophecy its call, echoing with warnings. The bat flitting through darkness becomes a guide to the underworld. The butterfly, fragile yet restless, represents transformation and the soul's journey. You watch as a butterfly drifts past a tomb entrance in your imagination, its wings glowing in torchlight, and you sense how the living might have whispered a spirit passes. Even colors carried divine resonance. Red was lifeblood, and the east, black, was death and night. White was bone and purity, yellow the sun's fire. Every offering, every painted mural pulsed with this symbolic language. Imagine a priest arranging maize kernels by color: yellow for sun, white for bone, red for heart, black for fertile earth, each placed with whispered intent. You find yourself moving them too, one by one, as if arranging meaning could steady the world. At dawn, when the first rays spread across Monte Albán, the city itself seemed like a stage where earth and sky met. Priests blew conch shells, their sound deep and oceanic, though the sea lay far away. The conch call was the voice of gods carried on morning air. Villagers bowed their heads, children pressed against mothers, and for a breath, the mountain felt like the center of the universe. You lie still and feel that sensation too, the hum of cosmos wrapping around you. Vast yet close, ancient yet present. Stars, gods, ancestors, animals, all part of one woven world where nothing stands apart. As your breath slows, you realize that here in the Zapotec imagination, you are never alone. The sky watches the earth, whispers, the animals carry messages, and your own spirit has a twin somewhere in the unseen. You close your eyes and drift, knowing that the cosmos itself cradles you, an endless sacred dream. You wake in your imagination to the echo of drums, steady, deliberate, like footsteps of an army approaching across the valley. For all the sacred cycles and gentle rituals of planting, the Zapotec world was not free from conflict. In fact, war was woven tightly into the fabric of power, alliance, and survival. Monte Albán, high upon its mountain, was not only a temple city, but a fortress, its terraces and walls announcing strength to those who looked up from below. You picture warriors preparing for a campaign. They paint their faces with red striped symbols of courage and blood, and tie cotton armor quilted thick to absorb blows. In their hands are spears tipped with obsidian blades, so sharp they can split flesh and wood alike. Others carry atlatls, spear throwers that launch projectiles with deadly force, shields of woven reeds or wood, decorated with the symbols of their towns, flash in the sun. They march together, sandals scuffing, dust voices chanting to keep time. To them, war is not only about land, but about balance, feeding the gods with captured enemies, asserting the order of their cosmos through victory. One mainstream fact lives in the stones of Monte Albán. Carved slabs in Building J record the names of conquered towns, place glyphs, mountains, rivers. Plants paired with upside-down heads mark victories. You trace one of those glyphs with your mind's eye and realize it was once a message of domination carved for all who entered the plaza. The city didn't need banners or proclamations. The stone itself whispered, "We are strong." But war wasn't only conquest, it was also about shifting alliances. You imagine emissaries travelling through valleys, carrying gifts of jade beads, woven cloth, and cacao. They speak in formal tones, offering peace and marriage bonds. Sometimes alliances are sealed with festivals, dancers moving in spirals, while nobles exchange bracelets and promises. Other times negotiations falter and drums beat the call to arms again. In your imagination, you sit beside one of these emissaries, feeling the weight of his journey, every word a gamble between bloodshed and peace. The mystical tidbit flows here in the belief that war had divine sanction. Captured warriors were not merely prisoners, but living offerings destined to carry messages to the gods. Imagine a ritual where captives are painted with sacred symbols, paraded before the community, and then sacrificed with solemn ceremony. Their spirits, it was believed, would rise as messengers, bridging the human and divine. The people watching would not see cruelty, they would see balance maintained, God's satisfied reigns assured. You shiver at how differently the world was understood, yet you sense the sincerity of that faith. Historians still argue whether Monte Albán's rise was driven primarily by military conquest or by political persuasion. Some suggest the city exerted control through force, subduing surrounding valleys into submission. Others argue Monte Albán became a kind of neutral ground, a sacred capital where multiple communities shared rituals and governance. Archaeological evidence supports both fortifications that imply war and cultural blending that suggest cooperation. The truth, like so many human stories, is likely both. From the mountaintop, you look across the valleys and imagine the smoke of burning fields. Rising from an enemy town, the cries of warriors carried on the wind. Then you turn and see another scene, traders from that same town, arriving months later, baskets on their backs, welcomed into Monte Albán's market. War and trade rivalry and alliance were not opposites here. They were rhythms alternating like day and night. You wander into a ball court and again you sense war disguised as game. Two teams face off, striking the heavy rubber ball with hips and thighs, trying to keep it in play. To the crowd, the game echoes, cosmic struggle the ball as the sun, the court as the path of the heavens. But beneath that symbolism lies politics. Some historians believe important disputes may have been resolved through ball games sparing bloodshed with ritualized competition. You hear the slap of the ball, the cheer of the crowd, the tension of fate hanging on each bounce. At night the warriors return. Fires glow on terraces and victory songs rise into the air. Drums thud deep flutes keen high and families gather to welcome sons, husbands, fathers. Women bring out tamales, wrapped in steaming maize leaves, gourds of pulque to drink. Children stare wide-eyed at painted shields, trying them on in play. The mountain hums with pride, with relief, with stories of daring deeds. And yet beneath it there is grief too. Families, mourning those who did not return prayers, whispered to ancestors for comfort. You close your eyes and hear both the triumph and the sorrow. War, like the cosmos, is a cycle. It takes, it gives it shapes. The Zapotec walk that balance carefully, always mindful of the gods watching. You linger at the edge of the plaza, staring again at Building J. The glyphs stare back, calm, silent, certain. Conquests, written in stone alliances buried in memory, the hum of conflict echoing through the centuries. You take a long breath, letting the sound of drums fade until only the whisper of wind across the mountain remains. The drums of campaigning fade into a low, remembered rumble, and you drift back down the terraces where quieter powers rule glow and grit fire and fingers' patient breath over coals. If armies announce a city's strength, artisans make that strength last. You follow the scent of charcoal and damp clay into workshops where songs are low, tools are simple, and results are astonishing. A potter turns a lump of river clay into a thin-walled bowl with steady palms. The wheel in your mind, not a spinning disc, but a practiced circle of hand and memory. Zapotec greyware, elegant burnished cool as rain, smooth stone dries along a wall, each piece reflecting the light like a quiet mirror. You pass an effigy urn with the Storm Lord's face, its brows and fangs balanced by the soft flare of a headdress. Someone presses a reed into wet clay to score a line. Someone else rubs the surface with a smooth pebble until it shines like evening water. When the kiln flares, heat blooms across your cheeks, and the pots come out humming useful, beautiful, and ready to enter kitchens and tombs alike. A few terraces over stone clicks against stone obsidian nappers shaving glassy flakes. From a core, a single pass of the wrist leaves a blade thin as a breath, edges wickedly sharp. You tip the knife in your mind and watch light gather on it like a silver thread. The material is volcanic, not native to every valley, proof that pathways bind Oaxaca to far horizons. You imagine it travelling on a porter's back, wrapped in woven fibre, guarded like fire. If you've ever hiked with a heavy pack, you know the burn in your calves. Now multiply that by ridges and ravines, days and weeks. No pack animals, no wheels out here. Trade is a human cadence. Footstep by footstep, drumbeat steady. Then the cool flash of turquoise catches your attention, followed by the warm flare of gold. In a small, smoky room, a metalworker pumps a clay bellows while another steadies a crucible. Orange light licks the lips of the furnace. When the metal turns fluid, it shines like held sunset. They pour it into a mold, perhaps a pectoral shaped like a bat or a disc, with tiny raised dots. And when the casting breaks free, the room exhales as one. A jeweler fits a mosaic of turquoise chips into a backing of wood or shell, each blue sliver a fragment of sky. The mainstream fact you cradle here is simple and shimmering. Oaxaca's most famous cache, Monte Albán's Tomb 7, held an abundance of gold and turquoise mosaics, proof that craftsmen in these valleys and their Mixtec heirs mastered metal and stone with breathtaking finesse. You picture a mask glittering with inlays, every piece set so close you can't slip a hair between them. Ropes of shell beads spill from a basket creamy and pink. The sea is far away, yet it is here in your hands, shaped as ornaments and trumpet shells for ritual calls. Spondylus, the spiny oyster, glows like embers. Mother of pearl winks like moonlight underwater. Jade cool and green arrives from distant river valleys to the south. Cacao pods, wrinkled and fragrant, travel from humid lowlands. Cotton bales come from warm fields. Salt glitters from coastal pans. Markets turn this mountain into a hinge on which far places swing open. You step into the market itself and feel the buzz like bees in a flowering tree. Baskets of chilly piles of maize coils of dyed thread obsidian knives tucked in cloth gourds of chocolate frothed to a pale foam, bitter rich waking. The air is a braid of roasting scents, herbal tang, and the sweet smoke of copal drifting from a small altar where traders tip a few kernels in thanks before the bargaining begins. A woman touches a cloth to your wrist so you can feel its tight weave. A man rattles shell beads in his palm so you can hear the ocean inside them. Caravans knit the valleys to coasts and highlands. You follow one along a ridge path, the morning cool and bright. Men lean forward under tumplines, the strap across the forehead taking the weight of baskets stacked with obsidian salt cakes and rolled textiles. Guards carry spears and flint knives scanning for bandits or jaguars, or the steep treachery of wet stone. At night, they huddle under a woven cloth, warming cacao in a clay pot, sharing news like currency, who married whom, which town built a new shrine, where the rains have started. Before they sleep, they tuck a small charm into the lip of the fire, a flake of obsidian, a sprig of herb, a muttered wish. That is your mystical tidbit tonight, the belief that materials carry breath, turquoise, with sky breath gold, with sun breath, obsidian with lightning breath. When traders set off, they feed these breaths with a pinch of copal, asking the things themselves to arrive safely. Along these routes, ideas travel as surely as goods. The most striking proof glows, like a lantern in your memory. At Teotihuacan, far to the north, archaeologists have identified an Oaxaca barrio, a neighborhood where Zapotec people lived between about the 1st and 6th centuries CE. There in a foreign city, they set up temples with Zapotec-style urns and carved their own signs, evidence of long-distance movement trade and diplomatic entanglement. You imagine walking those narrow alleys and hearing your own language, smelling your valley's copal, seeing your gods' faces on unfamiliar walls. To leave home and find it again far away is a special kind of power. Historians still argue whether the turquoise that dazzles in Oaxaca arrived through direct caravans reaching into the deserts of the far north or through layered exchanges in central Mexican markets. They also debate whether the Oaxaca barrio at Teotihuacan belonged to merchants diplomats or a semi-autonomous community of migrants. The conversations rustle like palm fronds, never still always shading our understanding in new ways. You let the uncertainty be comfortable like a loose shirt in heat. In a dyer's yard, skeins of cotton hang, dripping from clay vats, their colours deep and steady. Reds bloom from cochineal, tiny insects gathered and dried on cactus paddles, ground and mixed with mordants to fix them fast. Indigo leaves stain the fingers of a woman who stirs a cool vat with a stick green turns blue. As the thread meets air magic and chemistry, the same story told in two tongues. You touch the fibers, they are soft, thirsty for pattern. On a backstrap loom, a weaver leans gently and rhythm returns, click, pull, beat. The cloth grows row by row, the way a valley grows field by field. Not every masterpiece is jewel bright. Some are small and meant for daily touch, a spindle whorl carved with a spiral, a bone needle polished by use, a gourd ladle etched with a curling serpent. You cradle one and feel a thumb groove where a life wore itself into the surface. That intimacy is the secret strength of craft things, that no hands make a culture strong. Back in the workshop, the goldsmith sets down his burnisher and lifts the piece to the light. You sense a hush ripple through the room, as if a new creature has just been born, and everyone is listening for its first breath. He rubs a final line, and the surface catches fire. You don't need to own it to feel richer. You only need to witness the moment a raw thing becomes itself. Trade days end the way most days do here, with food and voices. Merchants and makers gather in a courtyard, bowls of stew, steaming tortillas stacked warm. They count profits quietly, save a trinket for a child, put aside a perfect blade for a cousin's wedding. Laughter sparks like flint. Above them, constellations heave into place, and somewhere a conch sounds from a shrine, reminding everyone that even buying and selling rests on older exchanges, breath for breath, gift for gift, day for day. You walk away slowly, pockets light, heart full. The mountain city glows not only with temples, but with the steady light of craft. The valleys below are not only fields, but roads threads, tying Oaxaca to seas and deserts. Somewhere a porter adjusts his tumpline for tomorrow's climb. Somewhere a jeweler sets one last turquoise chip sky, meeting sun at the edge of a small, perfect face. The smell of dyes and smoke still clings to your memory when you turn eastward in your imagination, following a valley path that drifts away from Monte Albán. The road narrows, the air feels cooler, and the land begins to rise in soft folds. Before long, you arrive at Mitla, the other jewel of Zapotec sacredness, though it gleams in a very different way. While Monte Albán stands bold upon its mountain, Mitla waits low in the valley, modest in scale, but unmatched in mystery. The first thing you notice is the silence. Mitla does not shout its presence. It whispers. Temples sit in clusters, walls squared and plain at first glance. But as you step closer, your breath catches because every wall is dressed in mosaics so intricate you wonder how human hands shaped them. Thousands upon thousands of tiny stone pieces cut with patient precision, fitted together without mortar form, endless geometric patterns, diamonds, fretwork spirals, stepped motifs that seem to ripple as your eyes move across them. You reach out and press a fingertip to the cool surface, and it feels like touching woven cloth turned to stone. Mainstream fact holds that Mitla flourished later than Monte Albán, reaching its peak between the 12th and 16th centuries. By then, the site had become not just a civic center, but the chief religious heart of the Zapotec. Its name, given by the Nahuatl, speaking Mexica, meant place of the dead, echoing the Zapotec name Leobar, place of rest. You step slowly into that meaning, realizing this was not a city for ruling or warring, but for guiding souls between worlds. Inside the patios of Mitla, you feel embraced. Rectangular courtyards are enclosed by walls alive with mosaic panels, sunlight strikes the stones, and shadows deepen the patterns so the walls appear to breathe, to shift in rhythm with the day. Priests once walked here, their white robes trailing, their voices echoing in prayer. You hear them still, a faint murmur rising between stone and sky. The mystical tidbit glimmers in the stories told of Mitla's underworld. Tradition says that within its temples lie passageways to realms below, where spirits journey after death. Some Spanish chroniclers wrote of priests who entered caverns beneath the site to commune with the dead. You picture a doorway in shadow half hidden, where torches flicker and the air grows cooler as one descends. The thought sends a shiver up your neck, imagination and faith entwined in this valley of mosaics. You wander through the church group, where later colonial builders set a Catholic church atop Zapotec foundations. The contrast startles Spanish arches rising over ancient stone fretwork, but the old patterns endure beneath, quietly defiant. In the columns group, you stand before 6 great monoliths, each column carved from single blocks of volcanic stone, immense and unmoving. Touch one and you feel the solidity of centuries. The columns once supported roofed halls where rituals unfolded, where the living addressed the spirits with solemn chants. Historians still argue whether Mitla was primarily a Zapotec creation, or whether Mixtec influences shaped much of its later design. Some note that by the time Mitla reached its height, Mixtec lords ruled parts of Oaxaca, blending traditions with their Zapotec predecessors. Others insist the mosaic style is uniquely Zapotec, unmatched anywhere else in Mesoamerica. The debate hovers in the air like dust motes in sunlight, unsettled, glimmering, never quite still. In one of the tombs beneath Mitla, you descend a narrow staircase into a chamber shaped like a cross. The walls are lined with mosaics, even here in the dark patterns alive with meaning. The torch in your imagination flickers shadows racing across the stones. The air smells of age and limestone. You pause, aware that bones once lay here, accompanied by offerings of pottery beads and food. You breathe carefully, sensing the closeness of death and life intertwined and inseparable. Above-ground festivals once brought the courtyards alive. Imagine torches blazing in niches, dancers moving with feathered capes, priests raising conch shells to call across the valley. The walls of mosaic patterns seem to pulse in the firelight, hypnotic and eternal. You hear drums steady and soft, like the heartbeat of the underworld itself. Children watched with wide eyes, clutching their mothers' skirts, feeling both fear and wonder at the world, unseen but near. The patterns themselves carry stories. Step fret motifs symbolize water mountains, lightening the meeting of natural forces. Spirals suggest cycles, eternity, the turning of time. Diamonds represent eyes, guardians watching. When you stare too long, the mosaics seem to move, guiding your gaze deeper, as if you're being pulled into another realm. You let your eyes soften, and for a moment the walls ripple like water. The sun sets on Mitla, casting golden light across its courtyards. Shadows lengthen, and the mosaic walls glow with warmth before cooling into dusk. You stand at the center of a courtyard, arms outstretched, the patterns surrounding you like a woven cloak. You feel both small and infinite, as if the place itself is holding you in its geometry. And as night falls, you realize Mitla is not only a city, but a threshold, a liminal space where the living and the dead, the earthly and the divine, the visible and the hidden all meet. You close your eyes, and the fretwork continues behind your eyelids, endless, eternal, whispering you deeper into dream. The mosaics of Mitla blur in your memory, and slowly, like a candle guttering, the scene changes. You hear the sound of horses' hooves striking stone, a sound foreign to these valleys for thousands of years. Armor clinks, voices speak in Spanish, and the sacred silence of Mitla is shaken. The 16th century arrives, and with it the colonial shadows that spread across the Zapotec world. You walk through Monte Albán once more, but this time the plazas are empty of priests and markets. Spanish soldiers climb the stairways, priests carrying crosses behind them. Where incense once drifted, incense still burns, but now for Catholic Mass. You hear Latin chants instead of Zapotec prayers. The stones do not protest, but they remember. On the platforms, the new conquerors see ruins to be mined, for building material, not temples alive with meaning. In Mitla, the change is even more direct. The Church of San Pablo is raised atop Zapotec foundations, its heavy Spanish arches looming over the mosaic fretwork that still peeks out beneath. The symbolism is sharp new faith set above the old one tradition pressed onto another. Yet, as you look closer, the ancient walls remain enduring beneath the weight of conquest, their patterns still whispering. Mainstream history records that Spanish friars worked tirelessly to convert Zapotec communities. They taught Christian catechism, built churches, and imposed new festivals. Yet they also adapted blending Catholic saints with native deities, timing feasts to match sacred Zapotec calendars. You imagine a procession on All Saints' Day, villagers carrying candles and flowers to cemeteries. To the friars it is Christian devotion. To the Zapotec, it feels very much like continuing their ancient communion with ancestors. The mystical tidbit lives in this continuity. Zapotec beliefs about the dead did not vanish under conquest. They transformed, surviving beneath Catholic layers. Ancestor veneration became All Souls. Rituals offerings of food and drink became part of Christian festivals. Even today in Oaxaca's Dia de los Muertos, you see altars filled with maize, chocolate mezcal, and copal smoke offerings that echo those placed in tombs 1,000 years ago. The living still believe the dead return, guided by scent, light, and memory. You step into a Zapotec village in the 1600s. The church bell tolls calling people to Mass. Families kneel inside eyes, on the crucifix lips murmuring prayers. But afterward they walk to the cemetery, laying tamales and flowers at graves. Children light candles their glow, flickering like stars among the stones. Somewhere in the mix, a grandmother whispers in Zapotec, a language that still carries the cadence of ancient chants. You feel how the people bend but do not break, carrying their traditions quietly within. Historians still argue whether the Zapotecs accepted Christianity, sincerely blending it seamlessly into their worldview, or whether their faith remained separate beneath outward conformity. Some documents suggest deep conversion. Others hint at hidden practices, rituals and caves, whispered prayers to Cadijo, even as crosses hung above. The truth is complex, layered, like the mosaics of Mitla, both faiths woven into one pattern, never entirely one or the other. Colonial life changes rhythms. Tribute is demanded, maize labor cloth flowing from Zapotec households to Spanish encomenderos. Fields once planted for community now feed imperial coffers. You walk through terraces where men bend under loads of maize, their faces set in quiet endurance. Women weave cloth to meet quotas' fingers moving faster than before, the loom clacking like a heartbeat under pressure. The city-states of old dissolve into parishes' valleys, reorganized under new names. Yet in kitchens, tortillas are still pressed beans. Simmer children laugh, and the Zapotec tongue still rolls across lips. Life continues altered but unbroken. You imagine a scene in Mitla, a friar preaching in Spanish villages, nodding yet afterward in the shadows of the mosaic walls. A family whispers prayers to ancestors, leaving a gourd of cacao as an offering. The blending is seamless, old and new, speaking in harmony. The walls, after all, have seen it all before. They carry no judgment, only memory. At Monte Albán, the once bustling plazas fall to silence. The city is abandoned, its temples no longer used, its stones left to weather. Grass grows in cracks, owls roost in corners, and wind carries only fragments of memory. You walk alone across the plaza, hearing only your own footsteps. Yet the stones still hum faintly, as if waiting for someone to listen again. And that is the paradox of conquest. Cities may fall silent, but people endure. In villages tucked into valleys and ridges, Zapotec families continue to plant maize to honor ancestors, to speak their language. The empire may change, but the land remembers its own rhythms, and so do the people. As you drift into the hush of night, you see a candle flickering on an altar. Above it hangs a cross, beside it sits a clay urn, shaped like Cocijo, its fanged face watching. Both glow together in the same light. You breathe deeply, and the scent of copal rises once more, just as it always has. The plazas of Monte Albán lie quiet in your mind, grass softening their edges, stones resting under centuries of sky. Time passes, and the silence is broken, not by priests or warriors, but by the crunch of boots and the scrape of shovels. It is the late 19th and early 20th centuries, and archaeologists arrive curious, careful, and sometimes clumsy to uncover what the Zapotec left behind. The mountain breathes again, not with ritual, but with discovery. You imagine yourself walking beside Alfonso Caso in 1932, the Mexican archaeologist whose work here changed history. The sun beats down as he directs workers clearing a platform. Dust rises, shovels clink against stone, and suddenly an opening. A doorway sealed for centuries. Caso descends into the earth, torchlight flickering across painted walls, and the chamber reveals itself Tomb 7. Your breath quickens as if you are there, standing shoulder to shoulder with him, watching as light strikes gold for the first time in hundreds of years. Inside treasures lie waiting, golden pectorals shaped like bats, and discs, turquoise mosaics shimmering like frozen sky-carved bones, etched with delicate scenes, beads of shell and jade. Caso records carefully, his notebook filling with sketches and notes. For the world beyond Oaxaca, Tomb 7 is a revelation, proof of extraordinary artistry, complexity, and wealth in Zapotec and Mixtec traditions. For the local people, it is not only archaeology, but a reminder of their ancestors' brilliance. The mainstream fact is clear. Tomb 7 contained more than 500 artifacts, making it one of the richest burial finds in the Americas. Museums today still display those pieces, each one a testament to the artistry you walked among earlier, each one a whisper from the mountain's heart. You picture yourself holding one mosaic mask, its turquoise pieces, fitted with impossible precision, and you feel the weight not of stone but of memory. Yet archaeology here is never only science. There is mystery, controversy, even spirituality. Some local people say spirits guard these tombs, and those who disturb them risk sickness or misfortune. Workers at Monte Albán told stories of strange dreams, of whispers in the dark, of feeling watched. That is your mystical tidbit, the belief that the ancestors themselves still linger restless when their resting places are opened. You stand at the mouth of a tomb, wind sighing past, and feel a chill, as if unseen eyes follow you. Historians and archaeologists still argue whether the treasures of Tomb 7 belong fully to the Zapotec or largely to the Mixtec, who are known to have reused older tombs. The artifacts show Mixtec style, but the tomb's architecture is Zapotec. Was it a shared resting place or a conquered city, repurposed? The debate continues, a reminder that even in discovery, the past resists being pinned down neatly. Beyond Tomb 7, excavations across Monte Albán reveal temples, houses, and ball courts. Archaeologists trace stairways with brushes, lift fragments of pottery, and uncover murals faded but still vibrant in reds and blacks. Each find pulls threads of history into the present. You watch them work, kneeling, brushing, measuring, and it feels almost like prayer, a careful conversation with the dead. In Mitla, archaeologists marvel at the mosaic sketching their endless patterns, documenting their precision. But the locals smile knowingly, as if the scientists only scratched the surface. To them, Mitla has always been alive, its meaning never lost. You walk between scholar and villager, sensing the two truths together, one measured in notes and surveys, the other carried in stories and rituals. Even today, debates ripple through the halls of museums. Should the treasures of Tomb 7 rest in Oaxaca, where they were found, or travel to Mexico City? Should they be returned entirely to local communities? The conversation continues, echoing the same themes of power, memory, and belonging that shaped the Zapotec world itself. You feel how archaeology is not only about the past, but about identity now, about who tells the story and who listens. At night, you picture Monte Albán under moonlight, half-excavated trenches and walls exposed. Archaeologists sleep in tents nearby, their notebooks tucked under pillows. The mountain feels restless, half awake, half dreaming. You walk quietly across the plaza, hearing your own footsteps mix with echoes of drums and shovels, priests and professors, warriors and tourists. Time layers itself here, thick and inseparable. You pause by a carved stone, the danzantes. Again, their twisted forms etched in silence. Casso once studied these two, debating whether they were captives dancers or shamans. You run your hand along the cool grooves and realize that even with modern tools, some questions will never be answered. Perhaps they are not meant to be. Some mysteries exist to remind us that the past has its own voice, not ours. You stand in the grand plaza, empty once more. Stars shimmer above just as they did for priests, warriors and farmers, and now for archaeologists. You feel the continuity, the way Monte Albán keeps opening itself slowly, piece by piece, never all at once. Discovery is not a finish line. It is an unfolding patient as stone. As your breathing slows, you imagine yourself with brush in hand sweeping soil from a shard of pottery. The fragment gleams briefly in torchlight, and for a heartbeat you are connected across centuries to the potter who shaped it, to the hand that held it, to the archaeologist who found it, and to your own hand tonight, steady and gentle. The chain is unbroken, the conversation ongoing. You rest in that thought, calm and certain as the mountain hums beneath you. The dust of excavation settles behind you, and your steps drift into the present day. The plazas and mosaics are no longer only the domain of archaeologists, but of living people, descendants, who still walk these valleys carrying language, stories, and traditions that reach back thousands of years. You pause in a village in Oaxaca, sunlight spilling onto adobe walls, and you hear Zapotec words spoken as easily as breath. Mainstream fact reminds you that Zapotec is not one language, but many a family of more than 50 distinct variants still spoken today by nearly 500,000 people. Each valley, each town shapes its words differently, like branches of a tree growing from the same ancient root. You listen as two elders converse, their tones rising and falling in musical cadence, every syllable carrying centuries. Children chase each other in the plaza, switching seamlessly between Zapotec and Spanish, their laughter blending languages without effort. You realize the old tongue still breathes alive in kitchens, markets, and festivals. In a courtyard, women prepare for a fiesta. They grind maize on metats, the rhythmic rasping sound echoing from the days of Monte Albán. Large pots bubble with mole, thick with chocolate chili, and spices, the scent rich and warm. Tamales are wrapped in maize leaves, steaming in clay pots. Bottles of mezcal distilled from agave stand ready to be shared. You taste it in your imagination, smoky and strong. A drink that warms chest and spirit. The community gathers as night falls, music rising. Violins, guitars, marimbas, mingling with the beat of drums. Dancers spin in bright skirts, ribbons, trailing feet striking the ground in rhythms as old as the valleys themselves. The mystical tidbit lingers here in ritual festivals. On the Day of the Dead, families build altars in their homes, laying out bread, chocolate fruit, flowers, candles, and photos. But they also place maize tortillas, mezcal and copal incense, the same offerings their ancestors placed in tombs millennia ago. They believe spirits return to visit, guided by scent and flame. You walk through a cemetery at night, candles flickering on every grave, marigold petals glowing like embers. Families sit beside tombs, sharing food and stories, laughing softly as if the dead sit beside them. The line between past and present dissolves in the warm light. Historians still argue about how much of today's festivals are purely indigenous survivals versus colonial blends. Some insist the Day of the Dead is a fusion of Catholic All Souls traditions with Zapotec and Mixtec beliefs. Others argue the indigenous practices are the core with Spanish layers draped around them. But as you stand there watching children fall asleep against gravestones while elders whisper prayers in Zapotec, the debate feels less important than the lived reality. The tradition is alive, and it carries both heritages gracefully. You wander through a weaving workshop in Teotitlan del Valle, famous for its textiles. Wool introduced after the Spanish conquest is dyed with cochineal for brilliant reds, with indigo for deep blues, with marigold for golden yellows. On backstrap looms and pedal looms, artisans weave rugs and garments patterned with diamonds, spirals and step frets that echo the mosaics of Mitla. The designs are old stories carried forward, each thread a memory. You touch one rug, and its texture feels both ancient and new, soft wool woven into sacred geometry. Music carries you onward. A brass band plays in a village fiesta, trumpets and tubas filling the plaza with sound. Boys and girls dance holding hands, their steps guided by tradition. In another corner, elders sing songs in Zapotec, their voices steady words rolling in cadence that sounds like prayer, even when it is only love or humor. Language and music together feel like a river, always moving, yet always the same water. The Zapotec identity is also fiercely tied to land. Farmers still plant maize beans and squash, often using traditional methods honoring the cycles set centuries ago. You walk into a field at dawn, the earth cool beneath your feet, and see a farmer sprinkle maize kernels at the edge before planting just as ancestors did. He whispers a blessing in Zapotec, then pushes the seeds into the soil. The act is both work and ritual, a dialogue with the land. In towns, modern life flows too. People carry smartphones, buses roar through streets. Television hums in houses. Yet traditions endure. Weddings feature ancient rituals. The bride and groom kneel before an altar of flowers, their hands tied with a red ribbon, symbolizing union blessed by ancestors. Funerals still bring families together for days of mourning, with food prayers and music guiding the soul onward. Continuity is woven into every stage of life. You pause in a classroom where children learn Zapotec, alongside Spanish, guided by teachers who fight to preserve their language. On the chalkboard, syllables are written out, their sounds taught carefully, children repeat in chorus, their voices bright and determined. This is the living legacy, the effort to keep the old words alive for new generations. As dusk falls, you find yourself back in a plaza where villagers sit together under strings of lights. The air is filled with food, laughter, and song. Someone strikes up a flute and a child begins to dance. An elder tells a story of cloud ancestors, his voice steady, the children listening with wide eyes. The same tales told at Monte Albán are still told, now reshaped, but not lost. You realize the Zapotec are not only descendants of a civilization, they are the civilization still alive, still walking these valleys. You breathe deeply, letting the scent of wood smoke and flowers settle in your lungs. The stars above are the same stars seen from Monte Albán's plaza, and the people below still honor them. Continuity hums all around you, threads woven through centuries strong and unbroken. You close your eyes and hear Zapotec words warm and melodic, and they feel like a lullaby carrying you deeper into history's dream. The voices of modern Zapotec life echo in your ears. As you drift one last time into the valley's twilight, the mountains stand like guardians. Monte Albán perched high, Mitla nestled low, both shimmering in your imagination as if lit from within. You stand between them, sensing how their stories stretch like threads across thousands of years. From the earliest villages to the sacred cities, from conquest to festivals, still alive today, the continuum hums all around you, unbroken and eternal. You walk once more through Monte Albán's plaza. The temples rise in silence. Stairways steep their shadows long in the fading light. You feel the ghosts of priests climbing, carrying incense and prayers. You hear the whispers of scribes pressing glyphs into stone warriors marching with painted shields, farmers carrying baskets of maize. Every sound folds into a single, steady rhythm, the heartbeat of a city that refuses to fade. You press your palm to the stone and it feels warm, as if the mountain itself remembers you. Then you descend into Mitla. The mosaics glow in torchlight, their patterns infinite, their meanings deep. You trace a spiral with your finger, and it seems to move, guiding you inward. A doorway opens in your imagination, and you glimpse the underworld beyond, not frightening, but calm, a place of rest. Ancestors sit there smiling, waiting with patience. You realize that for the Zapotec, death was never an end, but a continuation, a journey along paths laid by gods and guided by the living's offerings. The mainstream fact lingers. Monte Albán and Mitla are today UNESCO World Heritage Sites, protected and visited by travellers from around the world. Archaeologists continue to study them, piecing together puzzles of glyphs, tombs and trade. Tourists walk their plazas, snapping photos, marvelling at the stones. Yet, beneath the science and tourism, these places remain sacred. Locals still visit, leaving flowers and candles, whispering prayers in Zapotec. The cities are not museums, they are living memory. The mystical tidbit breathes softly. Some say that at night, when the plaza's empty and the last tourist departs, the gods return. Cosillo strides across Monte Albán with lightning in his hand. Jaguar spirits prowl the terraces, ancestors emerge from tombs to stretch their bones. In Mitla, patterns shimmer with inner fire, opening doors unseen. You pause and wonder if the stones themselves dream, holding the weight of centuries like a lullaby sung to the earth. Historians still argue whether the Zapotec rose purely from their valleys or through influence from neighbours like the Olmec, whether Monte Albán dominated through conquest or alliance, whether Mitla's mosaics were Zapotec or shaped by Mixtec hands. But as you stand between the two cities, the debates fade like echoes. What endures is clear a civilization that lasted for millennia, that shaped valleys into temples, that honoured ancestors, gods and cycles with steady devotion. The Zapotec did not vanish, they adapted, endured, and still breathe in the valleys today. You tilt your head back and watch the stars ignite. The same stars that priests tracked with obsidian mirrors, that guided farmers' calendars, that inspired myths of gods and spirits, now shine above you. Time feels thin here, as if you could step through centuries with a single stride. You exhale slowly, letting the weight of the journey fall away. The valleys of Oaxaca cradle you gently, their hills soft in the dark, their rivers whispering. Monte Albán stands. Above Mitla rests below, and between them lies the unbroken thread of the Zapotec people. You feel it stretch into you too, a reminder that every story, ancient or modern, still hums in the living world. You close your eyes and the hum becomes a lullaby, steady, soothing, endless. The wind down begins soft and slow. The plaza's dim torches fading into memory, leaving only starlight. Your breath eases long and calm, as if time itself exhales with you. The mosaics of Mitla blur into patterns behind your eyelids, spiral softening into clouds, fretwork unravelling into gentle ripples. You let them drift away, each pattern loosening like a knot untied. The mountains that watched over the Zapotec still stand, but in your mind they quiet too, their silhouettes dissolving into the horizon. The fields fall still, the markets empty, the temples silent. Even the gods step back, their voices fading to a whisper you no longer need to chase. What remains is calm, a hush vast and tender wrapping you like a blanket. Imagine lying on the valley floor, cool earth beneath you, stars shimmering above. The air is soft, carrying only the faintest hum of crickets. Your body grows heavy, your mind drifts light. All the journeys of priests, warriors, farmers, and storytellers settle into stillness, their rhythms blending with your own heartbeat. Every step you took tonight, through villages, plazas, tombs, mosaics, was only a path toward this moment of rest. The Zapotec world lingers behind your closed eyes, but it asks nothing now. It lets you sleep to drift to dream. The valleys of Oaxaca cradle you as they have cradled countless lives before, patient and enduring. And so you surrender to it, stone and star wind and whisper carried gently, calmly into timeless dreams.